Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. Happy to be with you once again as we start to really dive into this matchup. We have another episode before we get to kickoff between Penn State and Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. Mark Brennan, Daniel Gallen will join me. They're on the ground in Arizona for coverage leading up to that matchup. We'll have another episode for you. We'll give you our predictions and really preview this thing out from a Penn State standpoint. Last episode, in case you missed it, we had some updates from Penn State, from Happy Valley, based on some conversations with members of the staff, with players on the team, and just some really key takeaways from what we've picked up so far during this playoff run that Penn State hopes to extend deep into January. And, of course, the opponent in front of their face right now is a 12-1 Broncos squad that won the Mountain West Conference. They've had success in that Fiesta Bowl setting, just as Penn State has. And we'll dive into Boise State right now with an insider, Carter Davis. He's followed that program for a while. The last couple of seasons, he's done that within the 24/7 Sports Network over at BroncoCountry.com. And Carter, we never know what the college football playoff is going to bring us. We know that SMU kind of had to study up on them in a short period of time. We're doing the same now with Boise State for the quarterfinal showdown. So thanks for coming on board and helping us through that process.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm glad to spend give any Bronco knowledge to any Nittany Lion fans that I can.
I think everyone says, okay, they got a really good running back. They've got a blue field. That's about it. Largely, I think if you just gauge the average Penn State fan, they'd probably say, oh, they won a lot of games this year too. Obviously, they're in the playoff. They had a bye week as a conference champion. But let's begin with the obvious, and that is that the fact that Ashton Jeanty could end this game as the all-time single-season rushing leader in college football history. Right now, that's a mark that belongs to the great Barry Sanders, who did it at Oklahoma State in the late 1980s. Now Jeanty has that in his crosshairs, and the Penn State's defense understands the mission is to slow him down by any means possible. What does it look like through these 13 matchups as he's been on this march toward doing something so rare in college football?
Honestly, Tyler, it was not something that I expected to happen. At the beginning of the season, Boise State gave out like video game cases, kind of showcasing Ashton Jeanty's stats from the season prior, showcasing like what he's done on the West Coast of football. And in my eyes, I was like, this is an awesome piece of PR. This is great. But I never thought we would get to where we are now. Ashton Jeanty legit took 2 to 3 steps up in his game. And so, I mean, right now, it's amazing to see. It's probably the most historic Bronco football season that anybody will ever see from any player. And so just as a fan, it's awesome to see. And just from an analytical point of view, it's great because, I mean, he probably would have already broke the record if he didn't have to sit out 8 quarters because he sat out against Utah State. He sat out against our FCS opponent, and he got hurt. So he had to sit out some other quarters as well. So honestly, he could have already broken the record, but hopefully he does break it in the bowl game. Win or lose, I love Ashton Jeanty, and I hope he does great things in that game.
6 games out of 13, he's gone for at least 200 yards on the ground. I know James Franklin was highly complimentary of what he brings to the field from a lot of different characteristics. But in your opinion, based on his sample size, and you said taking his game to another level, what is it that has really separated him from just about everybody he's sharing a football field with through this 2024 campaign?
I think the thing that separates him the most is his low center of gravity and the ability to break tackles. If you watch some of his biggest highlights, it's not him hitting a hole and then bursting 75 yards untouched. I mean, if you look at the highlight of Wazoo, there's 2 separate runs that go for 40 plus yards where he breaks 4 or 5 tackles, spins, jukes, hits the hole, and breaks somebody's ankles. And so it's really his low center of gravity and the ability to make 2 or 3 guys tackle him. That's what Penn State is going to need is 2 or 3 guys. I'm not saying Penn State doesn't have good tacklers, but if you watch the Oregon game, he broke off a 70-yard run where he broke 2 tackles and then hit breakaway speed. So that's his thing. Low center of gravity, and he's hard to bring down.
Yeah, 7.3 yards per carry, and that's on 344 carries, a real workload to this stage of the season. Almost 2,500 yards. He needs 131 yards from reaching that single-season record from Barry Sanders at Oklahoma State in 1980. 488. Averaged almost 200 yards per game this season, was number 2 in the Heisman vote. James Franklin called him a beast, and he also referenced the yards after contact. He said this guy's got 1,300, 1,400 plus yards after contact, which is just a ridiculous number. And so Franklin brought up that power to his game. When you put him on a field here against a team like Penn State, we've only seen Oregon take on Boise State. We don't have a huge sample size of what it looks like against high-level Power 4 competition this year. But one, what is the success that you think will carry over against this Nittany Lions team, regardless of who they're bringing from a talent perspective? And number 2, what concerns you about the ground game, about Ashton Jeanty and their ability to match pass success against this particular Penn State squad?
Absolutely. So first, what I think works an advantage is ever since week 2, teams have been putting 7, 8 guys in the box. And I imagine that's what Penn State is going to do as well. So I think that gives an advantage to the offensive line. This is something they've seen before. Now, it might not be the level of talent, but they've seen 8 guys in a box before, and they've managed to put 150, 200 yards. Also, I think Ashton Jeanty is just a generational talent. So he's just one of those players that no matter what you do, he's going to get his. It's more of a situation of containing him than stopping him. But for the Penn State side, I mean, Penn State, 7th in the country in rush defense. We faced a UNLV team that had a top 10 rush defense, but they've been going against Mountain West opponents. They went against some bottom level Big 12 teams. If you look at some of the other teams we played, San Jose State, Wyoming, any other sort of Mountain West team you put out there, they're not really putting out the best competition for Ashton Jeanty. And so my concern is, even though he's a generational talent, even though Boise State has seen the amount of guys in the box, I'm not sure we've seen the level of talent that Penn State is going to be able to put out there. I believe Abdul Carter is one of the best defensive players around right now, and Boise State just hasn't seen that. I'm pretty sure Oregon is still 30th in rush defense in the country, so they're not as good. So that's my concern. We have the talent to go against it, but I'm not sure we have, the overall talent to kind of match Penn State.
When you look at his partner there in the backfield, not a lot of people are going to know the name Maddox Madsen compared to the name of Ashton Jeanty at this stage of the calendar year. But it's time to pay attention to him if you're a Penn State fan, because he's the quarterback. I'm looking through kind of his game log on the year. 4 of the last 5 games, he's under 200 yards passing. Look at that Oregon matchup. He's under 50% passing, 148 yards through the air against the Ducks in a 3-point loss. I guess make the case that he's more than a game manager. Make the case that he's somebody who could move the needle in this type of matchup, because I think on the surface, people just say, oh, this is the guy whose job it is to not turn the ball over, make sure they're putting Jeanty in position to pick up first downs. And overall, you're just trying to manage the game if there ever was a game manager. 22 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 62% completion with 2,700 passing yards. Is he more than a game manager, or is that what he is?
I believe Maddox Madsen is more than a game manager, but he's also a team player, and he's slotted into the role that was given to him. I want to backtrack just a little bit to the 2023 season. Last year, Taylen Green was our starting quarterback. And throughout the year, Maddox Madsen kept coming into the game more. Our former head coach, Andy Avalos, said, all right, now it's a 2-quarterback system. And it just kept going to a point, and Bronco fans will remember this because it's the most astounding thing I've ever seen a coach do. Taylen Green started the game, 1 play. Maddox Madsen came in, he played the rest of the game. But Andy Avalos before the game said Taylen Green was the starter. And so after that, Taylen Green transferred to Arkansas, where he's now the starting quarterback after the season. But Maddox got hurt, but that's neither here nor there. Coming into this season, we had Malachi Nelson, former 5-star recruit. It was a quarterback competition. I myself wanted Malachi because Bronco Nation has been missing, a really strong quarterback. Maddox Madsen beat him. So now Maddox has led a Bronco team to a college football playoff, a 12-1 record. He beat out a starting SEC quarterback. He beat out a former 5-star quarterback. Now, if we want to debate Malachi Nelson, I mean, he just took a visit to UTEP. I don't know, but still, he was a 5-star. And so Maddox Madsen is more than just, what you see on paper. He is they call him the Mad Dog here in Boise because he is. He fights hard. He plays hard. But like I said before, he is also a role player. Ashton Jeanty was always going to be the central piece of the offense. Like that was given. But if you go back to the San Diego State game, that was the game where you really saw what Maddox could do because San Diego State stacked the box 7-8 deep and he was able to pick apart the defense in the back. That's what he can do. He can sit back, little intermediate throws, move the chains, make the teams respect the pass. But there's been games where he couldn't do that. So I like to say that Maddox is a game manager, but he has the ability to do more and he has done more. And that's where I think this game really kind of hinges on. What type of Maddox Madison are we going to see? The one at Oregon where he was under 50%, couldn't really hit a pass, really didn't help move the chains, or the one against San Diego State and against the UNLV teams. UNLV has a good defense, and he was able to keep things moving until Ashton Jeanty was able to do his thing as well.
One interception since September at the quarterback play. So we'll see if that carries over. We saw Penn State was able to stir up some trouble last week against SMU, and that resulted in 3 interceptions in the first half, 2 of which went for turnover. When we get a look around this offense and beyond that backfield, I know Matt Lauder is a tight end that's been pretty consistently involved for Boise State. He's a veteran on this team. Camper, the wide receiver, is the guy that we remember from playing ball in the Big Ten for Indiana. He's the leading receiver. Can you talk about when the targets are not going to Jeanty? Who are the playmakers around the field that Penn State needs to be aware of? And what do you make of the offensive front for the Broncos?
Absolutely, yeah. Matt Lauder, I think, is Maddox Madsen's favorite target. He's second in receptions on the team, mostly intermediate and red zone throws. I believe he leads the team in touchdown receptions as a tight end. So that just shows you how much he likes him, especially in the red zone. Leading receivers, Cam Camper. He's done great this year. Also, kind of a secondary wide receiver, too, is Latrell Caples. He's a guy that's been around for a long time. I believe he's coming back. So this will be like his 6th season. Very experienced wide receiver. Camper, as you said, you already know. Matt Lauder is great. We do actually have a very quick local kid named Austin Bolt. He hasn't played as much, but he was, I believe, Idaho Gatorade Player of the Year in basketball and football. I could be wrong on one of those two, but he was a huge superstar here in Boise at Bora High School. Stayed to go to Boise State, has had injuries, but he can be a breakout player. He is super fast. So that's somebody that hasn't done much, but you always have to look out for. And then moving to the Boise State offensive line, we got Cage Casey, left tackle. I believe he's the one going against Abdul Carter. So that'll be, a great matchup if you're loving offensive versus defensive line matchups. What's something that maybe a lot of Penn State fans don't know is that our starting center, Mason Randolph, tore his bicep against Georgia Southern the first game. He just came back against Oregon State and the UNLV in the Mountain West Championship game. So we didn't have him the whole season. Roger Carrion, our starting right guard, he got hurt in the Oregon game. He came back against Oregon State. So that about whole middle half of the season, we didn't have our 2 starting interior linemen. So I don't want to say that could have helped in any way. I don't want to do hypotheticals, but having those 2 back with some sort of games to kind of get back into the mental game of it with Oregon State, UNLV, and now the huge gap from the Mountain West Championship game to now, I expect our offensive line to be better than maybe what is being seen on film by any sort of a person trying to looking into that.
Speaking of looking on film, what would you say about this offense's ability to go out and assert itself the way it wants to against Penn State or any of the teams that are left in this playoff tournament? We've seen Boise State have a lot of success, but I've noted that they were the favorite in every matchup since that Oregon loss in September. So it's been a while since they were in a situation where I think they were the perceived underdog in a matchup where there was some question whether they could dictate terms. And so what do you think about their ability to continue to do that? And what is ultimately the biggest question mark, in your opinion, for this offense and how it translates to the field in the Fiesta Bowl?
Yeah, so I believe that Boise State has a very boring offense if they're able to dictate what they want. It's a lot of inside zone for a couple yards, a lot of check down passes for a couple yards. You're not going to see explosive plays in the pass game for Boise State. I mean, if you get a 75-yard Ashton Jeanty run, that's the most explosive thing we've done, really. I don't think there's been a pass for 60 plus yards that's gone for a touchdown. If there has, that just shows how little there has been because I can't remember it. So really, if Boise State, if they want to dictate the offensive game, is little by little runs, kind of almost like a military school. Not as much like triple option, but they want to bleed the clock. We won our first UNLV game by finishing off with like a 9-minute drive. We weren't going anywhere. We were just play after play, play after play, Jeanty, louder, intermediate pass, Jeanty. So that's how we really dictate that. But my biggest question for the Boise State offense is how can we handle, the Penn State defensive line? I watched Penn State SMU, and Kevin Jennings did not look comfortable at all. Never been to Happy Valley, but I've seen the stadium before. It is massive. I'm sure he's not something that he's used to, but still, it's I worry that Maddox Madsen won't be able to handle, the pass rush coming at him. I worry that the offensive line won't be able to open up the small amount of holes that Jeanty needs because ultimately our offense is run. If you stop the run, you force Maddox to do something he hasn't done all year, which is not what you want in a playoff game when you're trying to stick to your script. So the run obviously is the most important thing for Boise State and the thing I'm most worried about.
Flipping the field, looking at Boise State's defense versus Penn State's offense. This is a Penn State offense that's been able to run the ball quite well in the last month or so, particularly with its traditional approach. Those two running backs in postseason play, they've really started to hit their stride. Where have the Ducks maybe been, exploitable defensively through these games? I know that they carry a 12-1 record, but if you could poke some holes into the defense at this stage, where would they be? And what do you think have been kind of the foundational components of success that you think will treat them well on Tuesday when they take on Penn State?
Yeah, the biggest thing by far is the secondary. I'm pretty sure Boise State ranks the worst, if not the worst, in a lot of passing relating rankings, and the reason for that is actually, I couldn't really tell you the reason. There's a lot of reasons, but what has been given to us is that our defensive coordinator Eric Chenander likes doing some blitzes, especially with some secondary players. Some of our top tacklers are safeties and cornerbacks, specifically because of those blitzes, and by doing so, it leaves the back end open. But if you kind of poll Boise State fans, a lot of us would feel more comfortable with a 3rd and 5 than a 3rd and 15 because we give up a lot of 3rd and long pass plays. Not because we can't get a pass rush, but it just somehow always works out that way. It's just the Achilles heel of the defense. So the secondary is really the biggest concern for the entire game. But the biggest thing for Boise State is the front seven. Boise State ranks 5th in rush defense, and kind of how I said before with UNLV, we haven't really played that many good teams. Oregon, UNLV had some good running backs. Oregon State had some good running backs, but ultimately we haven't been tested like Boise State probably will be with Penn State. But, we got Ahmed Hassanin, 8.5 sacks, multiple tackles for loss. Jaden Virgin Morgan has 10 sacks. He also is kind of a game wrecker. We got some really big guys in the middle, Sheldon Newton, Herbert Gums, that really kind of lock up the interior. So I'm not as worried about the rush game. If Penn State starts going for 10 plus yards a run, that's more concerning than if Penn State starts going 15, 20 yards per pass, because the passes we've seen, but I haven't really seen anybody really run through the Bronco defense.
Let me ask you about the general psyche of the Broncos program and the community going to this matchup. We've mentioned the Fiesta Bowl history for them. They had 3 wins during, I think it was a 9-year span. Of course, I think anyone who followed football at the time remembers that Statue of Liberty play, remembers Ian Johnson, the running back, scoring the game-winning touchdown in overtime, then proposing to his cheerleader girlfriend. It was the stuff that dreams are made of. And Boise State for a long time was viewed kind of the poster child of the teams that just would not be given a seat at the table for a national championship opportunity. Meanwhile, you've got Penn State. And, they haven't been able to break through over the course of this modern college football playoff landscape. They've been able
Yep.
to do that with 12 teams, and here they are. They've got their seat at the table. So, generally, how much buzz is there around Boise State of this being a special season that can reach January and continue into January? And two, what is the view of this particular Penn State program that, again, has been on the doorstep of college football playoff contention for a long time now? They have their own brand, their own identity, and now I'm sure people at Boise State territory are trying to figure out what exactly they have in front of them.
Exactly. So, the psyche for Boise State fans and for the program at large is definitely excitement. I mean, we're a group of 5 team. We need to do this to stay relevant in the modern NIL age, because if we don't, we start falling behind. But it's a little more special because I brought up his name before. Andy Avalos was our coach for a few years before this season, and I love Andy as a player, but it just didn't work. And that's ultimately why he was fired before the season even ended last season. And I mean, last season, some people didn't even believe we were going to have a winning season because the team just looked flat. And I'm not sure if many Penn State people know this. Boise State has had 27 winning seasons in a row. Last time we didn't have a winning season was 1997, before I was born. So we are used to winning here. So Andy Avalos really kind of sucked the life out of the program. We got Spencer Danielson. He won the championship last year. First year as the actual head coach, 12-1, Mountain West championship, going to the playoff. This is what Boise State needed because we need to stay relevant. The idea that if Boise State were to fall behind like we already are with conference realignment would break a lot of hearts. And so this kind of gives us a little bit of hope. So psyche is great. Oh, what's up?
I was going to say Spencer Danielson, by the way, a homegrown coach for Boise
Yep.
State. He was a GA. He was a defensive end coach. He was a defensive coordinator, defensive line coach, and became the head coach. And he's done very well, obviously. But and now that he's got Penn State in his crosshairs, as we said, success in the Mountain West is one thing. I think people are pretty accustomed to that. But now, can you do it against the Penn States of the world? And then can you do it against a Georgia or a Notre Dame and so on and so forth? So how does it feel like now that it's directly here and the hypotheticals are gone and it is Penn State as the opponent that you've got to get through?
I trust Spencer Danielson. He talks a lot about loving his players, loving the program. And I love this program like he does. I trust in him. He hasn't performed well in big games just because he's so new. Last year, we played UCLA in a bowl game, but we had our 4th string quarterback that had never played a snap before. So that didn't go well. Oregon, one could argue we should have won, but special teams miscues kind of made that not happen, which it is what it is. That's football. But I trust in Spencer Danielson. I think a lot of people love him here. He's already got a contract extension being a first-year head coach. That's how much our AD, Jeremiah Dickey, loves him. So I believe in him. There's a lot of hope around this program, a lot of excitement that I haven't felt in years because we have a passionate fan base, but it's smaller. It's not as big as a Penn State national brand. I do believe Boise State is a national brand, but kind of just under the radar a little bit. So this has been awesome.
When you project out and think about this matchup when it kicks off, how do you kind of forecast things for Boise State, and where are you on the score prediction side of things as we stand now?
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of predictions about Boise State getting blown out, or people on ESPN are like, "Oh, Penn State has the easiest path to the semifinals," and I get why they're saying it. I mean, Penn State, Boise State. The perception here in Boise about Penn State is that it is Penn State. It is one of the most historic football teams in college football history. Kind of the same with you guys. We don't know much about Penn State. I know a little bit more because I lived in Philadelphia and I knew some alum there. But yeah, to really think about the game, I don't think it'll be as much of a margin as some people say. That could be a head heart situation, but I think people are overlooking us. But if I were to do a score prediction for the heart, I hope the Broncos win by 3 on like a last minute field goal. That's probably the best I could put out there. But brain, I struggle to really wrap my mind around a convincing Bronco victory. I'm assuming it'll be a Nittany Lion victory by like 7-10. I don't imagine our defense will be that bad to where it goes to a 14-21 point margin. If it does do that, that would be severely disappointing for a lot of Boise State fans, because this team, struggled with some teams they shouldn't have, but they've been gritty. If you ever want to go look at the San Jose State game, we struggled that first quarter and a half, then we kind of tightened it down, then went on like a 28-point run in the second half to win. Now, so the scoreline is a little iffy, but this team is gritty. They do fight. Boise State is not going to roll over just because it's Penn State. So I do think it'll be closer, but unless some more Fiesta Bowl magic is here for the Broncos, it's probably going to be a Penn State victory.
Appreciate the perspective. This was a Boise State team that had the lead over the Oregon Ducks in Eugene in the fourth quarter. So just be aware of that, everybody.
Yep.
That's their only loss on the season. We'll continue to talk about this matchup with our next episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast. For now, Carter, really appreciate your perspective there, learning about Boise on our program here, and good luck with your Broncos coverage the rest of this postseason.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you. That's going to do it for this episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast. Again, big thanks to Carter Davis for hopping on with us, breaking down the Broncos. We're on again before this matchup kicks off. We'll have Mark and Daniel join us from Arizona, what they're hearing from Fiesta Bowl pregame coverage, and ultimately what we think will happen on Tuesday night before we strike into 2025. Will Penn State still be alive when the new year rolls around? Will they be playing Notre Dame, Georgia? We'll learn soon enough, but one more matchup in our focus. We'll dive into that on the next episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast. For now, stepping aside, I'm Tyler Donahue. We'll be with you real soon.